Thank you for coming. Our program tonight is called Down Memory Lane. We have asked Guy Winch, Joyce Blow, and Malcolm Allen, 3 longtime South Hero residents, to take us down memory lane with stories that relate to pictures we could find, and some stories that don't have pictures. And we're hoping that you will contribute any tidbits that you know of as pictures are shown or as it strikes your fancy. So I'm going to introduce Guy first. Guy Winch lives on the corner of Route 2 and Hill Road. He's married to Barbara. Their house at one time was where the telephone operator switchboard was located. This is a picture of his house. His mother was a teacher at the Hill Street School, which is now an apartment building across the street. Do you have a picture of that, Paige? There. And the website she's showing is one that my students did, which is kind of a fun one. It's called South Hero Past and Present. But if you actually put in Guy Winch, South Hero, Vermont, you will get that page of his house. And if you put in Hill Road School, South Hero, Vermont, you'll get this page. So it's kind of cool. And his son Kevin and his wife live on Hill Road, in the same spot where Guy's mother lived. And Guy attended high school at the old white meeting house, currently called Granny's Attic. He was there 2 years, and then he spent 2 years at Milton, where he took a bus. They sent a bus down. Okay, so Joyce is right here. And Joyce Blow lives on Lakeview Road with her husband Henry. Do you have a picture of Joyce's?
I'm looking.
She is in the other, on the desktop. Go to the desktop. Yeah, that one. Joyce house. Go down on the left. Down, down, J. Down.
Width from the bottom.
There you go. Joyce's house. Up. Right there. Okay. So, Joyce lives on Lakeview Road with her husband Henry. They raised 7 kids in that house. Joyce grew up in South Hero. Her maiden name was Reginbald. She attended the Hill Street School for grades 1 to 4, and the Old White Meeting House for 5 to 8, and Milton for 4 years of high school. Okay, and Malcolm? Malcolm Allen lives on Route 2. He and his wife Nancy raised their daughter Bonnie there. Malcolm attended the Hill Street School, and he went 2 years to high school at the Old White Meeting House and 2 years to Burlington for high school. Malcolm had a car, so he got to drive to Burlington. He didn't have to take the bus. Malcolm also had a towing business in town for over 60 years, where he was well known for solving many of the wreckage conundrums that others couldn't solve. I'd like to thank Paige Brownell, our wonderful junior historian, who has done a wonderful job for us for the past 4 years. Many jobs. She comes early and helps us set up and does all the signs and put all these pictures on and many things. So thank you, Paige, very much. All right, so here's Guy.
Here I am. Well, we got together about a little over a week ago, I guess, and kind of discussed some things and so on. Can you hear me all right? Yes. And we started at 10:30, and didn't think we'd go very long, but 1 o'clock we finally decided we better quit. So I don't know what you're going to get tonight, for sure. But one thing we decided is, maybe I decided, we're going to talk about South Hero, Vermont, 90 plus years ago. Okay? That way nobody can I don't know what I'm talking about. Actually, I moved here, I don't know exactly when, but in about 1925, I think it was. My father took a job at running the Kinney farm up on South Street here. And one time got me thinking about some things. Fred Kinney, a few years ago, they come here from Florida, come up from Florida, and Edna used to work in the Granny's Attic. And he stopped, he walked down the road and he stopped and if he could see me, he stopped in and talked with me. And then if he didn't, he went down and saw Malcolm and talked with him. And he could talk for quite a while. And he could tell stories. As a matter of fact, what started this really, Joyce said something about they had a luncheon up at the, what was that place? Hmm? She don't remember.
I have to know more about what
Well,
you're speaking about.
up here, it used to be Zachary's. What's it called now?
McKee.
The pub.
Oh,
McKee's.
Oh, yes.
And she said they were having lunch up there one day, and a fellow sat across them, a fellow and his wife, and he got to talking about South Hero. And she said, I think his name was Kinney. Did Alan have an older brother, Kinney? We both said, yes, Alfred. Well, actually, Fred was in between. And but Fred was talking about, one time he came to the house and he said, I can remember the first time I met you. I was over at your place, and we lived across the road from the Kinney farm. And he said we were in that house, and I was over there, and I was talking with your mother and so on. Apparently he used to go there quite a lot. And you were running around in just a diaper, but apparently it was summertime, running around the place. My mother was washing. And you said all of a sudden, we heard, oh, excuse me. And we looked around and I was paddling across the road, or the floor, and the water was running out of the washing machine. And that's what I was going to go from there. That's what, in those days, they only had a wooden tub. And I don't know whether this one had a paddle in it. I think it did. And I don't remember how it was operated by hand or not. And it just paddled back and forth like some of the washing machines we have now. But it had to be hand operated. And on top they had a wringer strapped to it. And so the water had to be boiled. And I thought about this as what they had to do, the women had to do in those days. They had to boil the water on the cook stove, which is an iron stove. The firebox was one end, and the oven was in the middle, and on the other end was a reservoir. And the heat from the front end of it went down through and heated the water, the oven and the reservoir. Or they put big pots on top of the stove and had to heat their water there. And to get the water, they had to have a hand pump. Some houses had a pump in the house, in the kitchen, and others you had to go outside and pump it out of the well. And that's the way. There was no running water, no hot water or anything like that. So you think about the work they had to do. And of course, this was extra here. She had to restart everything. But then they had the plug in there was a wooden plug. So it's the only way you could drain it out. And when they wanted to drain the water out, they'd put a bucket underneath it and put it out and probably throw it outdoors somewhere. And then they had to put rinse water in and so on. That's just some of the things they had to do at that time. I don't know. I don't want to get into it. It's South Hero at that time, and for quite a few years later on, was nothing but a dairy town. It was more dairy farming community. There were a few summer people came up. There was 2 inns, the South Hero Inn and the Sandbar Inn, and they took on people that come up by the train, and they had big trunks. And some of the people had, I think Ray Mooney had a truck, and he used to go down and pick up for the South Hero Inn. I don't know about the Sandbar Inn, probably had the same thing. Pick the people up down at the railroad station and bring their trunks back up and so on. And a fellow by the name of Francis Doty was the picket master down there then. Francis kind of stuttered some, and so one time some of the people were leaving, when they were leaving, and sitting around there waiting for the train to come, and one of them asked Francis, he said, "What do you people do around here after we leave?" He said, he stuttered, he said, "First thing we do is fumigate the place." So, don't know, as I want to go on a lot right now, and we've got the others too, and we'll probably working to different places. I'm going to talk about there were two main stores that, when I remember, and it would be in the 30s, the early 30s. And there was the O.D. Fifield store, which is across the road from the south, well, the bank now, the South Hero Inn, now the bank. And then there was Tressler's store. And I think Joyce is going to talk about Tressler's store. Later on, we'll talk about the O.D. Fifield store.
Can I interject something right
Sure.
now? Since you were talking about Fred Kitty and the washing machine, they had property just 2 houses up from where we lived, and they would come up in the summertime, and their camp was right down by the bank. Now Kim has built his house and moved the other camp up. But Edna and Fred would have the old Ringer washing machine that went, I think it went up and down or beat it around, you know, it was a round tank, and they would get out there and hose from the house, and she would take the water from the washing machine, put it into the wringer. Fred would take it out into a 5-gallon pail of rinse water and then feed it back to her, and they would do this a couple times to thoroughly rinse it out, and then they would hang the wash up on a line. And some of you may remember seeing a picture of that in the Islander maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was really nice to see the two of them working together with the old Ringer washing machine.
Well, Fred had a lot of good stories, no question about that. And it's too bad he wouldn't be here to do this too. And Malcolm can talk about Fred too, because he started working for Arthur Allen, Malcolm's father, down at the garage. Now we're going to talk about the camp. My father built the camp for him.
So Joyce, you're going to give me the pictures.
I probably need a little money.
And you need more light. Okay.
And your picture.
Which is fine. I think we have them on a DVD, so I think it'll be fine.
Here, the Jocelyn.
Want to do this first?
This is the post office. These can be
These first.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this one says
I'm Joyce Blow, lifelong resident of South Arrow. I do have wonderful memories throughout the years. So many changes, so many generations before me and after. I love the islands. I'm proud to call South Arrow my home. Looking back in time, most of the roads had not been paved. People owned one car and or horses and buggy or sleighs in the winter. The car always required chains on the tires, and the heaters hardly kept us warm. Farming was the main income for the majority of families. Farm, family, and home. Our mail was brought in by train. Kenneth Jocelyn was a lifelong resident with his wife Edith. They lived on Keeler's Bay with their 2 sons, Donald and Horace, who became a well-known and loved dentist in Burlington. He still lives here in South Hero. Their mom, Edith, graduated from Penn State University. She became a speech therapist. She taught all 8th grades in North Hero schools. Kenneth was a postal worker on the train. Before the mail was brought in by air, it was delivered on our train. Billy Burnham would meet the train with his horse and buggy and transport the mail to the post office, where it was sorted and delivered by Seal Jocelyn. She was the post office master, or the postmaster, mistress, and she sorted the mail in her home. In early years, we had a once-a-week delivery. Now, I don't remember this. As a matter of fact, I did read that for 90 years, South Hero did not have any mail delivery, believe it or not. It was in the book. That's where I read that. And it says here, early years, we had once-a-week delivery. If the sandbar wasn't passable, they would drive across the ice in the spring by boat, and many times by horseback, holding the mail bag, a leather bag, above their head so as not to get the mail wet. At times, they would swim the horse with a boat behind. Some residents would drive to Burlington to get their mail in between deliveries. I lived with the assistant mail carrier, and I would wait for the mail to be sorted and ride the mail route all around South Arrow and put the mail in each mailbox. Some people might not have stamps. And of course, I don't know who would remember this, but they would put pennies. I think a stamp might have been 3 cents way back when. And they would tape pennies to the envelope or a clothespin. And if they didn't have 3 pennies and they had a nickel or a whatever, a dime, we would make change and put the stamp on the envelope and leave them their change in the mailbox, which I think was really, really neat. Let's see here, we got, and we would make the change, and that would be the end of that story. I was very young. I was about 6 years old at the time. But I find that there is a lot more research that can be done on the mail. That's really interesting, that it came in on the train in a bag, and they would throw it off. It was in a gray canvas bag. And the train would stop, and they'd throw it out on the ground. And Mr. Burnham had his little horse and buggy waiting for the train. And he'd take that mail and go right to the post office. And so that's the story on the mail. And I have another little short one about my grandfather, who was a blacksmith. And I have a couple pictures of him and Joe LaRose, which I really don't have much on Joe LaRose. Oh, I didn't tell him that was Joyce Jocelyn. Yeah,
we put up that one.
I was reading, so.
Okay, and then put up this one page. This one that says.
This was Seal Jocelyn's daughter, Joyce, sitting in front of the post office, which is located right around the corner from like where Iodine Springs is, just across from where you go up the Sunset Road, or I don't know the name of that road. And then Charlie,
Here we go.
her husband, this is Joyce Jocelyn, Seal Jocelyn and Charlie Jocelyn's daughter, and that's their home. In later years, Charlie opened up a garage right next to the post office building. And till later years, he grew older and they closed the garage. I will start with one more little short item here. My grandpa Reginald, the blacksmith. My grandfather was a serious man, and I thought he was a strong and handsome man. He smoked a pipe with cherry tobacco, and I always loved the smell. I have sat in his blacksmith shop many times, watching him stoke the real red-hot coals and shaping horseshoes, getting them fitted to the horse being shod. He didn't carry on much of a conversation. He went about doing his work easily. I quietly admired his strength and his profession. Those horses were huge, and he always had control. Customers always seemed satisfied. I never did know how much he charged. All I knew was my grandpa was a blacksmith, and that was how he made a living. He grew up in his home above the blacksmith shop. When he married my grandma, they moved in a large home near the blacksmith shop. They raised a large family and lived there their entire lives. And I do have a picture of Joe LaRose blacksmith shop, which is up on the screen. And I really don't know a lot about Joe LaRose, but I'm sure there are other people here that do. And I know that he had his shop in the middle of our town, and he was a very busy man. And that's about all I know about Joe LaRose. If anyone else has anything they want to add to that, maybe Malcolm or...
His son, Frank worked for my father in the shop. And one of the stories there, a guy went up to Sawyer's Island fishing fairly early in the season with a Model T Ford. Of course, they didn't weigh much, over probably 1,000 pounds. And when he got ready to come in, it wouldn't start. So he got to ride somehow up to the garage, and Dad asked him how much ice it was, and I don't remember how much. Of course, Dad had that big old Packard for a record, and he didn't think if he went out and stopped, it'd probably sink. So he had a set of tackle blocks with 100 feet of 1-inch rope in. They laid that on the fender, tied one end to the back of the wrecker. Frankie and him went out, made a loop in the other end of it. He made a circle around the Model T. Frankie jumped off, threw the rope over the end of the bumper, and it kept right on rolling.
His blacksmith shop, I believe, was right next to where the rescue building is now. It was the form of the building there for quite a while, but I think it's all torn down now.
Where was your father's blacksmith shop, Joyce?
My grandfather's blacksmith shop was just below the town line. There's a yellow house there now, and that was their home, which has been made over. But the blacksmith shop was just about maybe just a few yards further that way. And it has collapsed, and there's a pile of wood there now, and that's it. Turn this over to Malcolm.
My name is Malcolm Allen, and I never moved anywhere, but we moved the house back once, 120 feet before we got run over. I was born right in what is now the dining room, and been there ever since. And,
You ever get off the island?
what was that?
Did you ever get off the island?
Oh, quite a few times. And my father started out as a carpenter, working for an uncle of his. And then there was no one around to work on cars, and then the cars started coming in back in around 1920 and stuff. So we started tinkering on them. In some kind of, I know it was a blacksmith shop, but some kind of a shop on South Street, part-time. So, but he liked that work, so we decided he was going to take that up for his life's work. So he bought an acre of land in Joanne Robinson and built the first part of the garage down there in about 25. And that's where the town garage is. And so I started working in the shop there, probably in his way most of the time. And then in 1960, I actually took the business over. And I started my record business in 1948. And and within 61 years at it.
Which pictures did you want to show?
Well, that's a good one to start with. That's in 1931. As you can see, is a town hall office is right to the right. That's a Lynn half-track plow. The state had bought one, and the roads had been plugged for a few days, and they come up with that Lynn half-track to open the roads up. It had a 170 horse engine with a 4-speed transmission, with a forward and a low and reverse, and a half-track type rig. I got another picture here, so you can see what a half-track outfit looks like. See, there's got tracks on the back, and that was one of our car shows here a few years ago down in Rutland, and she really moved some snow, and of course that's the Sandbar Causeway. Before anything was done about raising it, with the ice pushed up on it, and I'm not exactly sure what year it is, but
45.
45? Oh, I see it now. And so that was, you didn't cross it very often in the spring.
1909,
1909 then?
this one.
Yeah. So,
Oh, this one you were going to show. This one.
and that was in, from sometime, there's no date on it, but it's, the wind had blown.
It's 45 again.
Okay, I knew it was either 45 to 47 because I was going to high school then, and we drove across that morning. The ice was about a foot thick on there, and there's a few spots you could jockey around and get out of the tracks as soon as you met another car, but not many went across that day.
What's this one?
And this is over in Melton, as you're coming up what is now exit 17, that's Route 2 in the spring of the year. And that's where it had tire chains on and stuff
The
like
good old
that,
days.
so they could get through. And that's my grandfather Alan with 6 horses on the road scraper. And the guy, a little bit hard to see, that's driving the horses, Bert Patno, that built my house. And that's the type of grader they had back then. A little later on, I don't have a picture of it, but they had a converted Fortune tractor grader, and just the wheels to raise and lower the blade, and the operator there, which was Faye's father most of the time, he didn't need any heater in it because he was almost sitting on the radiator of the tractor.
Matt,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, we'll back up a little bit. There's not many people remember, but Allen's Guard was a meeting place for all of our, well, we were teenagers. I remember the night we were down there, Malcolm's father walked over from the house, and he had his chair right in the middle of the overhead door with his cigar. And then it's just like it was yesterday, I can hear him now. There was this car coming around what we always call Bierman's Hill, skipping like the devil. Guy pulled up, gets out. He walked over to Mac's father. He said, my car's skipping. Without losing a puff of the cigar, Arthur says, well, anybody fool can hear that. And the guy stood there for a minute. He said to Arthur, he said, well, could you look at it? Well, he says, I was wondering when you were going to ask me. So I'll never forget this. The only man I've ever seen do that. It was a 4-cylinder car. He raised the hood up and put his 4 fingers on the spark plug to find out which. Oh my God! And that guy, I thought was going to pass out. But Arthur said that. Well, the guy made a comment about, do you do this often? Well, he says that's the only way to check on a spark plug.
Okay. So. Oh,
That's just a picture of what is now the town garage. I took just the amount of snow that was sliding down, hanging over the edge of the roof. And then there's another picture in front, back when we used to get snow. And here's the ice storm. I was coming down Featherbed Lane Hill. I've been up getting a car out up there. So I stopped up near the top of the hill and took a picture of it. And this is up by Differs Lane. That's my Aunt Grace standing on a snowbank up there. And you can see the height of the snow and stuff with a telephone pole there. And that's another picture of her standing up on the snow. And that's my dump truck. Was in 1954. My uncle Bob Allen was on the select board, and the engine went to pieces in the old Dodge town truck in January. And he come in, he said, you want to put the plow equipment on your truck and finish out the season? And so I said, sure. And that was one of the plows we used. We always had to have a V plow back those days. And then we also had a one-way sweeper plow to use with it. So I plowed snow that winter. And of course Donnie there, he did go out plowing. I got a story there that I got to tell. Buster Jamelin, who was the head of the plow outfit, had gone to Massachusetts, wanted to visit relatives, and it was early spring and didn't think that much more snow, and we got a big storm. And so Donnie was taking, they had one truck they were using, and he had put chains on, because he couldn't do anything without chains. And he called up, wanted to know if I had some cross chains to fit, to repair the chains. I said I probably have. Well, we went up and repaired the chains and got them on, and my brother was there. And he asked my brother if he wanted to drive the truck, and then Donnie would go up and get the cat grader and run that to catch up. And so Donnie called up a guy probably in St. Albans to get permission from my brother to drive the truck. And he wanted to know if my brother knew anything about driving trucks, and he'd been driving Mack tandems with 20-speed transmissions and stuff. So he took the truck and he worked the rest of, I think it was on Sunday, and he worked all night.
Well, actually, Mac, by the time we started and when we ended, it was 33 hours. During that storm around the sandbar, the old curve, I don't know if many people here remember the old curve, but snow, the way that we worked it that year, or that storm, His brother would go north and I would take the grader and go south just because I had a wing on the grader. And it was so funny, or it wasn't at the time, but it is now. I don't know if you remember, Russo had a garage and they had a Plymouth dealership. And they had just sold, about 2 days before, this Plymouth, with the high fins. It was a convertible. So we had snow, just like you saw the pictures there. We had it banked as high as we could get it. And I never felt it. The grader weighed 23 ton. I came around the curve because I wanted to widen it out a little bit. I never felt a thing.
Well, with the cushion that snows between you and the car.
Well, got up the road a ways, and, well, we always called his brother Tub. Tub stopped me and he said, "Do you know you hit a car?" I said, "I what?" Yeah, he said, "You did a good job." He said, "You didn't touch the body, but he said there's no top and no windshield." Well, I was a little bit afraid to call the boss. But that's what we thought was the center line turned out to be the breakdown lane. But it was, as Max said, that was quite a storm.
Yeah. I know when my brother got his check there for driving those 33 hours, it was less than $1 an hour.
Yeah.
And he said the state can go you know where if they want to.
Well,
They put him in at the very lowest pay scale.
oh yeah. Well, that first year, for what it's worth, I had to work a year. I was on probation for a year. I had 90 cents an hour. And you had to work 43 hours a week. I worked 14 years for them. And you can't guess when I got done. I was making just over $2 an hour.
Yeah.
And my roads that I had to take care of was just a blade. Was the end of the Whittemore Road where the brick house is, 314 down to the North Hero Elberg Bridge. And needless to say, you didn't sleep much.
No.
And you always knew if something happened, who you could get to help you to fix it. Mac would.
Some of those pictures right there, I don't recognize myself. Oh, there's one of our first school buses. And I don't remember that particular one, but it was a little while after that. Homer Gardner that lived on South Street called the kids, and he had a box thing, you know, built similar to that. That looks like canvas top, his was wood, and in this warm weather, he'd have it on a wagon. Come wintertime, take the body out and put it onto a set of sleighs to all the kids.
I rode the barge the first year I went to school. And it had two, kind of just wooden stools or something on each side, yeah, benches. And the next year we had a new school bus. This is the town of South Hero, with lots of snow.
Wait, what are you doing? This one is showing, I don't understand why that's showing. Anyway.
This is the one picture that I had of the ice storm. And I just thought I'd throw it in. I thought it was interesting.
Is that the 98th storm?
Yes.
Yeah.
Guy, can you tell the story about I remember South Street and Route 2, there used to be a monument there.
Yeah.
Was that a monument to somebody, about something?
Just to direct traffic.
Yeah.
To direct traffic?
Around there.
Oh, you were
But it
supposed
It was
you're supposed to stay on one side of it?
probably was, if I remember correctly, there was about a 2-inch post in the middle. And then they built a cement block right around it, and then they put it kind of like a pyramid up. And it was probably about, what, 6 feet tall?
I'd say about 6 feet.
To when was that there, remember?
What's that?
How long was it there? When did they finally get rid of it?
I'm talking about 90 years ago.
Oh.
No, it was after the fire department took the rest of the ambulance, had the ambulance, because Charlie McBride and I was sleeping one night, I guess that's what you wanted. I was in bed one night, and in the middle of the night, all of a sudden there was an awful bang. I jumped right out of bed, and I went out and I could see something out there. And Charlie McBride, who lived the house next to me, we both got outside about the same time, and it was a car, was waiting. About, what was it?
Well,
Johnny White.
Warren.
No, it wasn't Warren, no, not that bad. He was Milton White's son. Anyway, he came down through there, and he apparently was, well, inebriated or something. And he was driving fast. He was following the white line down through there, and he never slowed up a bit. Never saw that. What we heard, he hit that, and it was right out in the middle of the road with the car sitting on top of it. And if he hadn't hit that, he'd have been in the lake, because he's going right down Hill Road and into the lake.
So Joyce, you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah.
Let her
if I
have the
could
microphone.
have the mic.
Yeah. Thank you.
This is the beginning of this school. And I'm standing right here with the photographer, Mr. Livingston, and he took this picture, and I thought it was interesting. I thought you might like to see it. It's been a few years.
That's the school on Hill Street?
No, this one.
Oh, this
This, yeah,
Where you're building your sitting.
yes, yep.
What year was that?
I'm not really sure.
Late 40s.
I was going to say mid-40s, mid-40s.
This is a sturgeon that was caught here. That's my mother on this side, and my stepdad's brother, Hollis Robinson. This is Pearlie Robinson, and my mom was married to Hollis Robinson. However, they're each standing on each side of this sturgeon that they got, as they did sturgeon fishing for quite a few years. And that was probably one of the bigger fish that they got here at the river, the mouth of the river. And that's quite a take. At least I thought so. I thought you might like to see it. I have, this is Homer Keeler, and I don't know if anyone knows who Homer Keeler would be, and me, when I was about 7 years old. He was our state's attorney, and he owned the Goulet farm on Keeler's Bay. He ran a large farm, and he was our state's attorney for quite some time. And he did a lot, or probably most of the town books in business papers. I know when they ended the creamery, the South Hero Creamery, he closed that business deal. But he was a very, very serious man. He was married to Kit Keeler. They had a fine family. And I always thought Keeler's Bay was named after Homer. But when I started reading these books, I saw Keelers all over the place. So I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to study enough to really know who named Keelers Bay and who it was named after.
Joyce, over in the Hyde Cabin, we have a book from back in the early 1800s, and it's inscribed inside, this is John Keeler's book. So they go way back.
I could see, it's just Keelers all over the place. And I just thought you might be interested because I've never heard anyone even speak of Keeler, Homer Keeler. And I'm 83 years old, and I thought he was a pretty special guy. And also, I have a story about the creamery. And I found that to be very, very interesting. And I'm going to read what I wrote here. South Hero Creamery. Dan Abbott was the operator, always on the job with a big smile. I shall always remember his warm and jovial manner. Grand Isle had a cooperative creamery. South Hero farmers brought their milk to Grand Isle. It was expensive and time-consuming. The farmers in South Hero decided they would form an association and decided it would be more profitable to build their own creamery and make their own butter. Before that, they had sent their butter fat to Grand Isle, I believe, and they made the butter there. And my husband also told me about the Grand Isle Creamery, that they made powdered milk there, and I never knew that. And he said it was on a big roller type thing, and he put his hand on it, and the powder would come off from it. And I was kind of interested in that as well. Anyway, this creamery certainly served the farmers very well here in South Hero. It was very much needed. Let's see, where am I here? It was more profitable to build their own creamery and make their own butter. The creamery in the morning, the farmers would bring their milk to the creamery in the morning. The milk was emptied in a bulk tank, and the cans were cleansed and sterilized by pressurized steam. They were capped tightly and returned to the farmer. As the farms grew larger and the milk coolers became popular, the milk was shipped out in a milk tanker, I believe. I'm not sure if it was by train. Maybe someone would know. I assume that it might have been. And then the creamery was a very successful business adventure, one of the best the town of South Hero ever had. That's what it said in this book here. It's amazing how closely the transportation by the train for all shipping in and out of the town was located near the creamery, the general store, the post office, and the granary, all within 1 mile. So workable and convenient, serving our town. And here's a picture of the creamery. I'm sorry. Oh, you got it up. I'm not looking. I'm sorry. And maybe Malcolm or...
I can speak a little more about the creamery. The farms here were, a big farm then was about 22 cows, the larger farms. And the larger farms all shipped their milk to Grand Isle. And the Russo brothers had trucks, they sold international trucks, and they also had 5 of their own that they had out on the roads in the islands. 2 of them, I think, came to South Hero, Grand Isle, North Hero. I think the 3 towns are the most that they picked them up. And those all went to the Grand Isle Creamery, which is up just off the, well, probably people don't know where the tracks were up there now anyway. And of course they had a big building in the back and had to cut ice in the wintertime. Most of the farmers, those that had trucks, carried ice from where they cut it down in the gut there in Grand Isle and carried it up there and filled the ice houses. And the milk came in, and it would be, as they came in, first person got it, would tap the cover off, smell the cover, put it down, then he put a dipstick in it so they could measure the milk itself to see whether there's any bacteria or anything in it. And then they'd put it through, as she said, through a steamer. Now in South Hero, the small farms, and a lot of them were small farms. Matter of fact, I think I counted something like 35 or 40 farms actually in South Hero. And they were anywhere from 1 cow to 4 or 5 cows, smaller ones. And they all had to separate their milk before they sent it to the creamery. I believe that's right. I think they only took the cream. And of course the cream was made into butter. And a pound of butter was about, what would that be, 6 inches, something like that, square. It was square. And it was about 1.5 inches thick probably. And it had little markings around it. So that each quarter, so we wanted to cut it in 2 or in 1/4, which they had to do at the stores sometime. And then and it had SH something C. I can't remember what all 4, but in each quarter there was a little initial in it. So South Hero butter. It was called South Hero butter. While I'm thinking about it, Malcolm was talking about a joke, or Donnie talked about a joke. I can talk one on Malcolm too. And a friend of mine, this is not too long ago, had built a place in Grand Isle, and he had a tractor, and he had to come down to South Hero to get the tire. One of his front tires went bad, so they took it to the where the mobile station is now, and he asked them if they could fix up the tire, and they said, we don't have anything for it to fit it. We can't do it. But if you go down to the garage right down there and told him about where they were, he said he's got an outfit that he can do the whole thing. So he went down there, and he walked up to the front door, and you could see inside somebody sitting at a desk inside there. So he opened the door up and walked in, and the fellow sitting in the chair said, "Can I help you?" He said, "Well, I've got a little problem." And Malcolm says, "Most of the people come through that door do." I was going to talk about the store that was there as O.D. Fifield. Called when I was there, that was about the early 30s. It was O.D. Fifield and Son. And I understand that they used upstairs was a dance hall at one time, but then it was made into apartments, and we moved into that until my father got to his house fixed down on Hill Road. And the store had a big porch on the front. And I know that one time my father said O.D. was standing there with him, they were talking, and there were a bunch of trucks going by with scrap iron on them. And he turned to Dad and he says, "Harvey, someday that stuff is all going to be, it's going to Japan." He said, "Someday all that stuff is going to be used on us." Think about that. About 10 years later. Then it went to Branch's store, and I worked in Branch's store for a while when I got out of the service. And I guess when I got out of the service the second time was when I went back and worked for Darwin. And Saturday nights when we got through, about time to get through, about 4 or 5 young fellows and so on would come up to the store. And the first thing they'd do is buy a quart of ice cream, a half-gallon of ice cream, and a big jar of juice, orange juice or Pepsi or whatever it might be. And one of them was Malcolm Allen, one of them was Norman Lawrence, and I don't think Ralph came too much, with Arthur Robinson. And when we got about time when I closed the store, then we'd head in for Burlington and either go into movies or go bowling or something like that. But I have a bowl here that, what does it say on it?
Max ice cream.
Max ice cream. That's his bowl. Yeah. Malcolm used to use, well, it's still, right up to the last time I knew, was still eating a lot of ice cream. So.
Well, 3 bowls, there would go, a half gallon, and make 3 bowls full, and that was 3 ball games on TV.
I do have another one. This is the last one that I have. This is going to be Tressler's store. And I have pictures here. Can you just hold a moment? The Tressler's store. Tressler's IGA store was owned and operated by Willard and Elizabeth Tressler.
Is that them, Joyce?
That's Elizabeth and Willard in their store. Yes. They had 2 children and they lived above the store. They were a fine family, hardworking. The store was located just north of the John Roy farm as it still stands. Their store was always well stocked with a wide variety of merchandise, neat and orderly. Fresh cut meats and cheeses, bakery, full service store, gas pumps and kerosene, and it wouldn't be a surprise to see a sleigh and a team of horses waiting out front of the store in the winter along with town vehicles. I believe Bill and Elizabeth owned the land the granary was on, and one house away from the store. It was called a feed room, where farmers purchased grains, chicken mash, corn, pig feed, all supplies for the farmers. I think they owned the land that the creamery was located on, and directly across the road from the IGA store. That's about all I have on the IGA store, but it certainly was a hub for our town, and it served our townspeople well, and it was supplied well enough, almost like a city store, and they were wonderful people. But it's amazing how the train station was our means of transportation in and out of the islands, other than Arthur Parker used to run his car from Grand Isle to Burlington. I don't know if it was once or twice a day, and if you wanted to go into town and spend the day, you'd call him and he would stop at your house, pick you up, and then he'd be at a certain place at night and you'd be home. And then we'd get on the train, and the train would take us right to the bottom of Church Street. And we'd spend the day and go to the movies after shopping, and then home we'd come. We'd make the train right after the movies, to just rush down to the depot. And the transportation was really, really so wonderful with having the train through the town. And everything that was shipped in and out of the islands, it was really done by that train. Not so many trucks. A few trucks would bring groceries to some of the local stores, and there were many other stores. Here's a picture of our meat man, and that was Bert Steady, and that was Bernard Steady's father. He lived in Milton, and he drove this refrigerated truck and sold meat door to door, and that's me in his arms. And I was always excited when he came, because he was the nicest man. And he always gave me a hot dog, and I always loved hot dogs. And believe it or not, my mother couldn't get me over 32 pounds for 3 years, but you'd never know that now. So anyway, that was interesting, and this is a picture of me, and my mother crocheted that dress, and it was so heavy I could hardly stand to have it on, because there was so much thread in it. And this is me at the sandbar on the dock in front of the inn, the Sandbar Inn, way back when. By the way, I lived with the local photographer, so I was with him a lot. And so I had my picture taken everywhere.
All right, so we're gonna switch to
And I don't know what else you have.
this one. Right there.
That's one of Dr. Parker's buses.
That is?
Yeah, that's up near, Gifford Lane.
Really?
See the snow there.
I have a postcard that was mailed to my grandmother with that picture on it from Grace Allen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my grandmother was in the hospital having one of the 11 kids.
Now that was plowed that in like that, or did you have a blower at that time?
Oh, they plowed it. They didn't have blowers back then.
So Malcolm, tell them about how they plowed the roads, and then they would get so deep with snow that what would they do?
Yeah, you take certain roads there, like you go down Chippy Point Road and turn towards the Lalmere Farm. That road would get filled in, so we couldn't open it up in the middle of the winter, and then we'd plow a place where we'd get into the field and drive through the field. Then on Landon Road, from South Street to the first house over there, that would get plugged up, then we'd go through the pasture. And then on Station Road, from Brent Hayes' farm down to Henry McBride's, that road would get plugged so you couldn't open it, and we'd take to the pasture there. Then also over at David Lane's, where the camps are now, there weren't any camps there now, and along the beach, that would get filled up so we couldn't do anything with it, and we'd go through the fields. So then, when spring come, you had to do something with some of these roads, because the frost started going out, and you couldn't drive through the fields. And so, was in 53 or 4 that the state got a new Cat 12 grader and a new Frank plow. And of course, Faye's father was road commissioner, and that's the winter I plowed some for the town. And we flagged Buster down one day, and Pat says, we gotta get these roads opened up because frost is starting to go out. And we started down at the Lalmere farm and got that one open, then we went around. And I don't remember if we got them all open the first day or had to go back second day, but we got them open. And where they put the grader was up right across the road for Tim Maxson. I got the farm there, that long building, that was a parking garage for the grader. And it was a 12-foot door in width. And that plow was 11 foot 6 inches wide from the ear. So Buster said, you had to be a little careful getting in there. Well, after opening up all these roads and pounding them, you know, we narrowed that plow up 6 inches. Buster said, went in a lot easier, didn't have to be so careful.
So what's this one, Malcolm?
This is a picture of my grandfather's car coming across the sandbar, perhaps in the spring. It was flooding. This is before the road was built up. And he was very he was very proud of his Rio, and this Rio was a fluid drive. And I don't know how many people know what a fluid drive is, but it's a shifter with a handle like this, and you turn it like this and push and you pull. But anyway, this was his pride and joy, and the thing that amazes me, it has a bulldog type thing on the very front of the car. That's the emblem. And today the Jaguar has the very same bulldog. And I'm wondering, this car was named Rio. And I wonder if that might have been associated with the Jaguar company, because they have the same emblem. Yeah. I don't know if anybody would know that, but I thought that was interesting.
That was quite a car in its day, the Rio.
Yes, it was, yes.
Oh, how about this one, Joyce? Push that.
Just sitting here talking and so on, as we did the other day and so on, talking about ice cream. When I worked at Branch's store, and this would be in the late 70s, yeah, it had to be the late 70s, and one day Darwin come in, of course they had gas pumps, and you went out and pumped gas, and then you come back in the house, or come back in the store, and you might go and cut some meat, or you might get an ice cream cone for somebody, or whatever. There's no such thing as washing your hands beforehand. That's the way things were. And the cookie, they had a big cookie tub-like, different kinds. You could go in, take cookies, that what you wanted, just pull them out there and put them in a bag. But the other thing I thought of, one day Darwin came in. He came in after he pumped some gas, and he went on the back, went right through and went out in the back part. And he came back with a big piece of cardboard, bread I think came in. It was a large piece. What are you going to do with that? He says, I just pumped 15 gallons of gas into that car. He says, it's registered in Cuba. And the fellow asked me, he said, can you change our oil? So he said, probably that holds about 15 gallons or 15 quarts of oil. I'm going to change the oil. And he got underneath, crawled underneath it, took I don't remember what he caught the oil in, and then came back in. As I said, if you didn't pay much attention today, you would be shot or something like that.
I got to tell you now, go to Bill Tressler. But I guess it dang him, let me play poker a little bit. And one night up North Herald at Bill Beardsley's place, they're playing poker, and just Bill Beardsley, who's run out of money, then he put his ice boats up for collateral. And I don't know if any of you folks have been down to the Maritime Museum and seen that big ice boat down there called the Storm King. That was one of the ice boats. And Bill Dresser won both the ice boats that night. And they set that big one up once, and everybody was scared to operate it. Oh, it was a huge thing. And Bill Beardsley had them built by somebody in New York State somewhere. I don't know just where, but that was his specialty, building up fancy ice boats. And of course, the smaller boat they set up 2-3 years and used that some. And then Bill Hazlett from Hazlett Strip Casting discovered the ice boats in the apple shed they used to use at Bill's store, and he bought them and put them down there at the Maritime Museum. He didn't take the small one down there, just the big one, the Storm King. And I went down with my wife and daughter there a number of years ago. I was reading the thing there, and how Bill Tressler had those built and stuff like that. And then I got interested a little more, and I called up his daughter, Barbara, down Rhode Island. John Roy was there, and we talked to her, and I was trying to get a little more information on the ice bowl. I said, as I understand it, he won them in a poker game from Bill Beardsley in North Hero. She said, I don't remember exactly, but something like that. He never had enough money where he ever had them built. And down there on the display, they had it written up as if Bill Tressler had those built. He didn't. And I corrected him up, down there, talked to the guy, the story on him. I don't know if they ever made a change in their display thing or not down there. But another thing at Tressler's store was a 17-acre apple orchard in back of it years ago. And Ray Allen run it for, I don't know if he rented it or what, but he run it, orchard for a little while.
Joyce, do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, that was my grandfather's receipt. My grandfather's receipt for his poll tax that we all had to pay way back when. And Ray Allen has signed it, and I believe that says $13.
70 cents.
1370.
I can't, yeah, okay.
1950.
I just happened to find that in the pictures.
Old age taxes.
And I had forgotten about poll tax that we had to pay.
It was a combination, poll and old age tax.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Poll and old age tax.
Well, they had to get money. What did they replace poll tax with? Do you know?
They just dropped it. Yeah,
What
just
was it?
eliminated.
What did it cover? What was the main purpose for it? It must have.
It's just a tax on individuals rather than just property.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought there might have been a specific reason.
Did you have to pay it to
That's
vote?
per person.
Was there a poor farm in the islands
No,
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
for indigent folks? I wondered if that's what
there.
that supported.
there.
there was a poor farm up in North Hero. I don't remember there being one in South Hero or Grand Isle.
Yeah, there was one in South Hero.
There was one in South Hero? Okay. Used to have a poor master here, and I think each town had that. And actually, the poor master was a person that was pretty well known in the town, and he knew pretty near all the people. So he could do when it came time. What happened a lot of times in the winter time, people had to have some help and so on, and money in groceries, mostly in groceries and stuff like that, and they would take that and let them have it. And then in the winter time, in the summertime, those people would go and work on a farm or something else and do some work, so they paid it back. And when the government decided they were going to take it over, we lost all of that part of it.
So, Guy, what is this picture of you and Malcolm? What is this picture?
The picture, I guess they got up there now, I can't see it, but the picture they have now was the junior choir from the Congregational Church. And that was 3-4 years ago, I guess, right?
The names are on the back.
The names are on the back.
Is this you, Guy? Is this Guy? This one?
I'm in there.
What year?
Malcolm's in it.
All right.
One of my sisters, I don't remember which one. I think it was Pat. I guess it was Pat. It was Pat, yeah. This is what the junior choir, they had a senior choir and a junior choir. And I think it,
Okay. Row 1. I don't know which one's row 1.
I think
Okay.
it's,
Down here, it's, let's do row 3, because this looks like, so this says Guy Winch, Marion Davis, Roberta Phelps, Ethel Davis, maybe back there, Barbara Tressler, Lois Allen, I'm not sure where, Norman Lawrence, Malcolm Allen, oh, there you are, Jack Bierman, Marion Podos, Philip Mooney, Grace Dubuque, Patricia Winch, and then this one, Arthur Lawrence, would that be this one? Ruth, is this Ruth Fifield?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Nancy McBride.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's a wonderful picture. Wow. How old do you think you guys are? Like about
I'd say,
19, 16,
no,
15?
no, younger, probably 14, 15, somewhere. That's my guess. It was before we went to high school.
Nancy McBride is Sue Crowley's sister.
Yes, I can see
Yeah.
Sue Crowley's sister.
Wonderful. Joyce, what's this one? Remember that one?
This is someone that I believe a few of you people might remember. This is Mr. Cargill.
Oh, God. We stuck potatoes at a standpipe. The superintendent of school, we made him stuff them in his tailpipe so the car wouldn't.
He was the kindest, most wonderful man. How could you do that? He would come down through the islands during our exam times, and he would walk, while we were taking our exams, he'd walk up and down the aisles in the school, in the schoolroom, and he'd come very quietly, and he'd look at our paper, and he'd kind of give us the answer very quietly. Boy, how we loved that man. And I just happened to find that. I want to share something. I found something in one of these books, and I was so excited. A question that I always wanted answered here on the islands as I was growing up. When I was little, whenever I wanted to ask a question, I wanted to know something, like maybe a certain kind of a flower or the name of a tree or a bird, or those were just the little questions that I wanted to know. But big questions, the adults always had the answers, and they were always teaching me, always. And the older people were so wise and they were so educated, and I couldn't see any high school around here. I was young, and I couldn't understand how they could be so smart. I read something in one of these books, and I was so excited. A teacher, an educated teacher, she had gone through college, and I don't remember her name. I've got to look it up. I didn't have time to do more research, so I don't remember her name. She came out here, and she knew there was a need for education, and she taught high school at the Maple Lawn Academy, which is now Granny's Attic. And when she taught high school, she taught college level. And so when they graduated from high school, they had a college education. And my grandmother was one of the students in one of the classes. But I'm sure, I don't know how many years she taught here, but I was so excited. I thought, no wonder they were all so smart. They had, a college education right here. And I thought that was the most wonderful thing. I was excited. Because their penmanship was absolutely beautiful. Their speech, their vocabulary, they just knew everything. All I had to do was ask. And it was thrilling, really, to find that out, that some woman cared enough to come out and educate people when they couldn't afford perhaps to go to college in this little town.
My mother graduated from there, I would say, about 1911.
It doesn't give the other, it only gave one class, and there was, I think Ray Allen might have been in that class. The only two I knew was my grandma and Ray Allen in that particular class.
I think they had about, it was a 4-year high school, because I got this out of the same thing. I think it's part of where I got my information. And several of the older people in like Malcolm's mother, and probably Grace too. I think Grace, and Bob Allen, Ray Allen, and I think she had about two different classes. In other words, eight years or something that was here. She had a school, as I understood it. I don't remember if it was in Milton or somewhere, and she left that one, or I think it was in Essex.
It was Essex.
Essex, yeah. And then came over here and started the Maple Lawn Academy. And then after that was they took it over for the what they call the grammar school.
And they used to, when they graduated, the whole town was invited, and they would go out on the ferry boat or on the boat, and the whole town would go.
Ticonderoga, probably.
The Ticonderoga, and that whole town would go, and it was a big deal, and they'd have a big dinner at the Congregational Church, and yeah, I remember reading that. Fanny Stevens was her name. Fanny Stevens.
Oh my goodness.
What's her name? And her husband was deaf, and he couldn't work, so she had to work. That's why she did this. Yes. Well,
Oh, that was nice.
yes. I just wanted to put the stone store up because I don't know if people knew that the Keelers, they had the Joanne Robinson store, Branch's store, went before Joanne Robinson. Abner Keeler ran a store there. It was called Keeler Store. Then they had a stone store, which was next to McKee's, and this is when the stone store burned. So I didn't know if people knew, if you ever heard about the stone store. It was next to McKee's, and it was a Keeler Bay store, before it was the Keelers.
When did it burn? Do you know what year?
No, but it was a long time ago. A long time ago.
Is that where Island Beverage is now?
You know where McKee's is?
Yeah.
It was next to it on the left, so it burned and they, oh, no, they did
Right
with
on
the
the
stone.
corner of Ferry Road, where
Yeah.
Coda's store is.
Yeah, well, it had to have been the corner.
It was next to, because Wadsworth ended up owning this, because he married Juliet Keeler, one of Abner Keeler's daughters. So Stephen Wadsworth ended up owning the stone store and McKee's, what McKee's is right now. What was the other thing I was going to tell you?
Something about the stove.
Oh, the stone. So Stephen Wadsworth, when this burned, didn't want to rebuild it. He decided not to rebuild it. He took all the stone, gave it to the cemetery, and there's a crypt in the cemetery, or there's a little building. That's the stone from this stone store.
Oh.
He gave it to the cemetery. So I think
Terry,
we're just about done.
there used to be a Phelps store on the corner of Keeler Bay Road and Route 2.
The Phelps store, Keeler Bay Road,
In Route 2.
and Route 2. Yes, I did hear about that. So that store right there.
Junior Gardner used to run that store at one time when I was younger, but Benita Phelps had it before that, and the post office used to be there.
Oh. And that lasted quite a while. It was into the 70s. There was a store in that building
Yes.
until they made it into apartments. I just didn't know if people ever saw how much beachfront there was. This is the little peninsula that coming out by the Sandbar Inn. And this is, look at them all at the beach.
Right.
There used to be a pretty popular beach spot.
Malcolm has one more.
One last thing, okay, and then I guess it's getting late.
Okay.
I was just having fun, but.
I have one thing I want.
And you want to show a picture, and Barb, yes? You want to say something? Okay.
I do want to say something.
Okay.
You have a museum. You have a wonderful museum right here across from the Blue Paddle. Most of what those men and what Joyce said tonight, you could find there. You could even find Mrs. Stevens' name there as a teacher. You can find all about the ice storm. You can find all about Ron Phelps. Please, for God's sakes, go to your museum. It doesn't cost you a dime. I mean it, I mean it.
And then
I was there for 20
Joyce,
years,
that's
I know what I meant. So please, open your hearts and get your feet up there for the new group.
Okay.
Joyce says, well, I may mention one thing. I got a whole mess of information on where the Merchant Bank is here. And before the stone, anything was built there, the cemetery was right on the corner where the stone part of the building was. And they moved the cemetery, and they built the original stone building in 1829. And that was a cemetery right there, and I got the name of all the owners, and all that stuff. We could go on for another hour if you want.
They dug up the graves and moved them up to the cemetery up here.
They had to, take them all up, move them. And
David Carter's house, underneath his office, that's where they all were, under his office.
And then with the, one more thing.
Go ahead, and then we have Faye have a picture.
The South Hero Inn, I gotta share this, remember we talked about it. The South Hero Inn had an extension on it, running this way. And it was a saloon type place, a bar. And it was called a bullpen. And there were two gentlemen that ran a farm nearly across from the inn, up a little ways. And it was Tom and Bert Gordon. And they were tall, lean men, and they were very, very quiet and mannerly. But they would go into the bullpens. I'll call it the bullpen. It was a place where travelers back then men would gather, men and women, but mostly men, and they would exchange. There wasn't a newspaper, so they would exchange their news and get caught up on the news, but they'd also have a few beers, and then there would be lodging. But the thing that Tom and Bert Gordon did, they were probably 6 feet tall, and they'd have maybe a couple beers, and then before they would leave, they'd leave very quietly. They were really tall, so they'd try to kick the light in the ceiling to see if they could reach it. And they were elderly gentlemen, and they could most generally touch that light before they left. And that was something that they did every time that they went in there. And I thought that was notable. I thought it was really neat. So I guess that's it for...
Well, we're going to show Faye's picture. Faye brought a picture. Oh my goodness. Let's see how well we can see it. Let's see. Okay, let's make it bigger. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do any of you recognize that building?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I don't.
Oh, I do.
That's where Mr. Montani was.
Yes.
This piece on this end's been torn off.
Oh, yeah.
That's
now
where
I see.
their, I think that's where their garage is now, isn't it?
Oh my goodness.
No, I don't think there's a, is there?
Yeah, there's a garage there now.
So did he own it then?
My aunt, my great aunt owned that from 1930, well, actually, she and her husband bought that place in 1917. And then they were divorced in 1933. And she opened up the bakery and the diner, and of course she had a license with liquor, well, I don't know if it's liquor license, I guess it was.
Is that your aunt there?
Huh?
Is that your aunt?
Yeah, that's my aunt. She had, there were gas pumps out front there. And she ran it for about 20 years, I think.
Did she sell to Montani then, or?
Yeah, she
Yeah.
sold to Mr. Montani. Mrs. Provenzano, right, and Mr. Montani. She sold to them in 1943.
1943. Nice, thank you.
And she went to work for Horace Corbin as a cook. She used to cook for them and so on.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to thank, you want more thing, Joyce? Okay.
They and I had our tonsils out together.
And Everett would like to say something?
We won't ask where.
Yeah, back in the early 60s, South River made the national headlines.
In the 60s, okay, I'm listening.
There was a bad accident here in South River, and there were 7 boys killed.
Oh, yes. Yep. The tree.
They hit a tree, the tree's gone now. I was on Old Route 2,
Yep.
and I was one of the first ones there at the accident. But after that, then the state decided to keep all the guys and the girls in Vermont, because they're all going to New York to drink. And 18 years old over there. So then the state finally dropped the age in Vermont to 18 for a number of years. But then it didn't solve any problems. So they went back up to 21 again.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's nice. Well, thank
That
you.
was pretty well established all over the country.
I should have brought the Life magazine, I got the story in the Life magazine.
Yeah.
That was funny, right after the crash, I got a telephone call from the engineer, the road engineer, wanted to know what the condition of the road was. Was it our fault? Which it wasn't.
It wasn't, huh?
The road was dry.
A lot of drinking.
Okay, so anyway, thank you. So we have wonderful, wonderful refreshments. I hope that people would love it, that Evelyn and Ann made. What?
We
And
have one
Lori?
famous person in this room,
Oh,
because his name was up there as future farmer of
I know.
America.
I know, I wanted to tell you
Somewhere in
that.
this room is standing a live person.
Yes, did everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes, she has it right there.
I got it.
She's got it. Okay, here we go. Make it
Where
bigger.
is he?
I'm working on it.
So Malcolm had this in his scrapbook, and I thought this was pretty special.
I think he's very special.
Very special.
Future farmer of America. Maxim. He's right here.
He began his farming career working for Hank Robinson for 10 years. After graduating from Vermont Technical College with a degree in dairy science, he began his own operation, renting Alan Kinney's farm on South Street 6 years ago. You have more than 100 animals with 62 milking head.
That was
at that time. Local farmers were delighted with the news. This is quite an honor. Kinney said, it's wonderful. He really deserves it. He's done so well, says Patsy Robinson. I'm really proud of him. You went to Texas?
Yeah,
What was in Texas? Was it
convention.
where a convention was?
The
Boy,
National Farm Bureau
29.
Convention.
That was through the American Farm Bureau, and I traveled back then, went to Hawaii a couple of times, in Texas and California, Florida, Las Vegas.
Wow. Do they do that anymore for farmers?
Yeah, I think they still have the program.
Yes, so thank you. So refreshments, everybody. Thank you, Malcolm and Guy and Joyce.